Greetings. My name is John Riccardi. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate and International Programs at Boston University School of Law, and I'm pleased to present this overview of the costs and financing options for LLM studies in the U.S. Pursuing an LLM degree in the U.S. is, let's face it, expensive. But that experience comes with substantial services, support, and resources which truly make the experience a transformative one, and one that should be looked upon as a long-term investment. An LLM degree will pay off handsomely over the course of your career. And it's from that perspective that I hope you consider the costs of attendance. You should always carefully think about planning your financial affairs and investigate thoroughly the sources of available funds for you, beginning at least a year in advance. And importantly as well, when you're comparing options between schools, take a broad perspective. If you can afford to attend your dream school, you should do so even if it's marginally more expensive than your second choice. You'll have a much better experience and a greater return on your investment if you have confidence in how this particular program is going to serve your needs. When you think about the costs of LLM studies, you need to think of three things. First, there are the direct costs. This includes tuition, student fees, books, and other supplies, the costs that are directly linked to your enrollment in your program. Then there are indirect costs. These include housing, utilities, food, essential living expenses, as well as any transportation you might have, getting to school on a daily basis or attending the program in the first place. And then there are opportunity costs. That's the amount of money you could have earned if you were working and other opportunities that are foregone. You need to think of all these costs when you're talking about the overall costs of attendance. So how much does an LLM degree cost? Let's take a look at the costs of attendance. And here's a range of costs presented in the various categories to consider. Tuition can range from $20,000 for a 9-month program to $70,000 for a 9-month program. There's a range of mandatory fees that schools levy. Generally speaking, there's a shorter or a smaller range of costs associated with books and supplies. There's room and board, which can differ significantly depending upon where you're living in the United States. There's mandatory healthcare insurance with some variability there, but every program requires you to have health insurance. And there are personal expenses, and these are oftentimes personal decisions. But you'll see the cost of attendance can range considerably from a little under $40,000 to over $140,000. There'll be other costs as well. Traveling, large purchases, other kinds of medical expenses, what you'll be doing during the summertime, you might consider, transportation, getting to school, and then after the program, application fees to sit for a bar, to prepare for the bar, and also what you'll be doing after the program ends during a period of optional practical training. Here are some important things to keep in mind. International students are not eligible for U.S. federal aid, such as Stafford loans or PLUS loans. If you do want a loan, it will need to come from a private lender, a bank, and this would require a U.S. citizen to co-sign the loan. To help you reduce your direct costs, Many LLM programs offer financial support, largely in the form of partial tuition waivers. You pay less tuition. Oftentimes, schools will offer application fee waivers, okay? And when you look at your options, you should consider whether there are any special scholarships awarded to people from certain countries. Okay? Many times these are funded by graduates of the law school. The bottom line is ask. Okay? Don't be shy. You should always ask about financial support. And as I mentioned earlier, you need to also think about the indirect costs, which will vary considerably depending upon your own lifestyle decisions and where you are in the country. As far as funding sources go, first and foremost, there are obviously family and friends. But you should also look to outside sources. There are local funding organizations in virtually every country. Okay? Fulbright scholarships are a popular source of financial support. Rotary scholarships, scholarships from philanthropic organizations like the Soros Foundation, and obviously look into whether your employer will help support your studies. Don't expect to pay for tuition while working during your studies. You can only work a certain number of hours on campus under a student visa, so you shouldn't expect that to take care of a large component of your costs. And when you submit your financial documents, make sure they accurately reflect your ability to pay. You can't count on working in the US, right, unless you've been granted a teaching or research assistantship, which are rare in LLM programs. Okay? So you need to keep this in mind. Here's an overview of some helpful resources for you to begin investigating the kinds of sources that you might look into to help support your studies. And yes, there are other ways to pursue an LLM degree that are less expensive. That includes online programs and executive programs. And for those of you who are permanent residents or US citizens, many programs offer part-time options. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, send along an email to bullm@bu.edu.